Have you ever been laughed at by someone you once saved? My name's Iris Mendenhall, and a year ago, my own sister-in-law mocked the way I dressed, in front of a room full of strangers, in the boutique I quietly paid for. That moment didn't just sting. It unraveled everything I thought I knew about family, silence, and self-worth. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. It was one of those soft May mornings in Asheville, when the air felt like it had just been laundered, cool, clean, and slightly floral from the dogwoods blooming outside my window. I remember standing in the little room I call my library, dusting the spines of old books I'd read and reread, when the phone rang. That sound doesn't startle me the way it used to, not anymore. But that day, it pulled something tight in my chest. Hey, can you come by a little earlier? Shelby's voice came through the line, chipper like she was already entertaining guests. I want you to see the new display before people start arriving. I paused, watching a sunbeam fall across the floorboards. Sure, I said, because that's what I always said. I didn't have much reason to rush anymore. The days felt long in retirement, even in a place as cozy as my little craftsman house on the east side of town. I filled them with simple routines, boiling chamomile tea in a chipped kettle, rearranging pots in my garden, flipping through second-hand cookbooks I rarely used. People told me I had a quiet life, like it was a compliment. And maybe it was. But quiet doesn't always mean peaceful. On my way downtown, I drove past the mural walls of the River Arts District, where local painters set up in converted warehouses. Some played banjos on folding chairs, some sold pottery from the back of vans. Asheville has a way of putting on a show without asking you to clap. Bloom plus Bramble sat on a corner where an old bakery used to be. I remembered the first time I saw the space, big windows, creaky floors, lots of light. Shelby was so full of ideas then. I helped her with the lease, fronted the deposit, paid for the initial build-out. Just until things get going, she had said. It felt good at the time. Generous. Like I was helping build something meaningful for family. When I walked in that morning, the place smelled like lavender and bergamot. Fabric swatches hung like streamers from the ceiling, and racks of lace dresses lined the walls like exhibits in a museum. The lighting was soft, deliberately curated. Everything about the boutique said effortless luxury, even though I knew exactly how much effort had gone into it. Mostly mine. Shelby floated over in a long floral kimono, a glass of rose in hand. She smiled wide, kissed my cheek. You look relaxed, she said, her eyes skimming over my outfit, a navy cotton skirt and a cardigan I'd picked up at a church thrift store in Montford. Nothing fancy, but clean, pressed, mine. Just happy to be here, I murmured. Y'all, this is our secret investor. Shelby called out to the group of women near the fitting room, laughing. Wouldn't have happened without her. I smiled, though it felt like my cheeks were made of wood. I've never liked being called that. Investor. Like I was a silent partner in a business I never signed up for. But I let it slide, the way I always did. Easier not to cause a scene. Then the front bell jingled as another cluster of women walked in, young, stylish, the kind that probably posted outfit reels and called each other babe without irony. Shelby turned to greet them, tossing her hair back like she was born to host. And then she said it. Oh no, she laughed, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't take style tips from her, unless you're into vintage from the graveyard. Laughter. Not loud, not cruel. But real. I didn't move. Just stood there with my arms gently crossed over my chest, staring at a display of silk scarves I'd helped pay for. One of the girls had her phone out. I saw the red record light flashing before she tilted it back into her purse. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My body had already begun to retreat, shoulders drawing in, breath shallowing. It was the kind of moment you don't feel until it's past. A flick of a comment, light as air, but heavy enough to split something open inside you. I stayed for a few more minutes, long enough to not seem abrupt. I smiled at someone near the tea stand. Nodded politely when Shelby introduced me again. Then I slipped out the front door, back into the bright Asheville morning. I don't remember what I said before I left. Maybe nothing at all. But I do remember this. I left something behind in that boutique. Something small, invisible, but not unimportant. And it wasn't kindness. When I got home that afternoon, I didn't slam a door or throw my purse on the floor like women do in movies. I just put the kettle on, out of habit, and sat at the kitchen table while the water boiled. The light was soft in the house, early evening sun slipping through the blinds, and everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning. But I didn't feel the same. There wasn't a name for the way my body felt, but hollow came close. Not hurt. Not angry, exactly. Just emptied. Like someone had knocked something loose in me and walked away without noticing. While the tea steeped, I opened the file drawer in the sideboard where I kept old receipts, warranty slips, insurance forms, my little paper trail of life. I hadn't touched the Bloom Plus Bramble folder in over a year. It had a faint lavender scent from the oil Shelby used in the boutique. I'd forgotten that. I pulled out the lease agreement. My name was still on it, my full name, in pen, in my own handwriting. I traced the letters slowly with my finger. At the time, it seemed harmless. Just easier to leave the contract in my name until things got settled. Shelby was so excited back then, and Jason was beaming with pride. I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing. Families helped each other. That's what I told myself. Nobody ever brought it up again. And neither did I. I put the papers back, closed the drawer, and didn't touch my tea. I couldn't shake the way Shelby's voice had sounded when she made that joke, sweet on the outside, sour underneath. And all the laughter, casual and sharp, like I was the only one in the room who hadn't been let in on it ahead of time. The next morning, I walked to the farmer's market near Pack Square. I didn't need anything, just needed to move. Something about the buzz of people buying lettuce and honey and handmade candles felt grounding. Like the world still had small, decent rhythms I could hold on to. That's where I saw him, Cal Freeman. He was crouched beside a stand of tomato plants, talking to a vendor about heirlooms. I hadn't seen him in years, not since the library days, when he used to come in on Thursday mornings to return books late and bring me donuts wrapped in paper napkins. He recognized me right away. "Iris," he said, like he was genuinely glad to see me. We ended up walking the booths together, trading stories about creaky knees and loud neighbors and why grocery store tomatoes will never taste like real ones. Cal hadn't changed much, still soft-spoken, still with that slight lean like he never quite stood up straight, like he was always listening for something. He told me he was working on opening a bookstore, a real one, with used books and armchairs and coffee that didn't come out of a Keurig. He'd been looking for a space to rent, but nothing had clicked yet. I don't know what made me say it, but I heard myself offer, "Why don't you stop by for tea later? I live just a few blocks away. We can talk shop, paperbacks, landlords, all the fun stuff." He came by that afternoon, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers from the market. My porch hadn't seen company in a long time, and it felt strange and nice all at once to set out 2 cups instead of 1. We sat outside with the breeze rustling through the maples. Cal told me about his divorce 5 years back, no drama, just 2 people growing in different directions. He talked about his cat, named Emerson, and how he was trying to live slower these days. I didn't say much, but I didn't have to. At one point, after a pause, he looked over at me and said, real quiet, "Some people think kindness means laying down flat for others. But kindness isn't the same as letting people walk all over you." I didn't answer. Not right away. I just stared at the teacup in my hands, still warm, still full. I think that was the first moment I realized something was shifting in me. The second moment came that night, when I took out the lease again and read it all the way through. Slowly this time. I saw my name at the top. My signature at the bottom. Shelby might have been the face of the boutique, but the bones of that place still belonged to me. And suddenly, I didn't feel hollow anymore. It was 3 days after the boutique opening when I got the message. It came from Bethany Collins, a retired teacher I used to volunteer with at the library. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but she sent me a link and just wrote, "Thought you should see this." I clicked on it without thinking. It was a short video, just 15 seconds, but it hit harder than any full-length feature could have. There I was, standing off to the side of Bloom plus Bramble, looking completely out of place, quiet, older, dressed in my thrifted navy skirt and soft cardigan, while Shelby smiled into the camera, gesturing toward me as she said, "Take style tips from her if you're aiming for vintage ghost chic." Then came the laughter. Light, harmless to anyone else, I suppose. But to me, watching it on a small screen in my kitchen with the volume low, it felt like being peeled open. The comments were a mix. Some people thought it was funny. Others weren't so sure. One person wrote, "That woman looks like she paid for the whole damn store and still gets mocked. SMH. Another, "Southern manners are dying, clearly." I didn't respond. I just sat there, phone in hand, heart thudding like I'd run uphill. It wasn't the joke that cut deepest. It was the tone. The casualness of it. The way Shelby said it like it was nothing, like I was nothing. And worse, how nobody in that video said a word in my defense. The phone rang later that night. "Shelby?" "Of course." "Hey," she started, in that high pitch people use when they know they've messed up but want to pretend they haven't. "So, apparently that little clip from the party is floating around. Don't worry, it'll blow over. People love a laugh." I didn't say anything. "Cheer," she drew the word out like it was something cute. "You're not mad, are you? I mean, come on. It was just a joke. Everyone was having fun. You know how people are these days." Still, I stayed quiet. "Look, you're not gonna make this into a whole thing, right? I mean, we have so much riding on this launch. I'm just asking you to be reasonable." That was when I hung up. No yelling. No dramatic exit line. Just a quiet click. The silence didn't last long. Jason called next. His voice was low, careful. I could picture him pacing in his backyard, scratching his head like he always did when he tried to calm things down without getting too involved. "Hey, sis. Look, I know that video's going around. Shelby's, well, you know how she is. She talks fast and doesn't always think. But she didn't mean anything by it." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the bird feeder I'd filled just that morning. A finch was there, pecking at the seeds like it had nowhere better to be. I envied it. "Shelby's under a lot of pressure," Jason continued. "The boutique's a huge risk. She's stressed, trying to make it work. Maybe just let this one go? I don't want things to get weird between us." He didn't say a word about how I felt. Not once. "No, I'm sorry she embarrassed you. No, you didn't deserve that. Just Shelby's stress. Shelby's risk. Shelby's voice." It was like I wasn't even part of the equation. After we hung up, I pulled out the worn box where I kept old letters, photos, and those things you can't quite throw away but don't want on display either. There was a card from the funeral home, Mom's name in gold script. I remembered how I'd arranged everything. The flowers. The obituary. The guests. Jason was still living in Oregon then. He hadn't flown in until the day before the service, and left the morning after. Just under that card was the invitation to his wedding. It arrived exactly 10 weeks after the funeral. Not a phone call. Just a printed card with swirly writing and a note at the bottom, "Hope you can make it." I remember opening it while the house still smelled faintly of lilies. That was the first time I realized how quickly people move on. Not just from grief, but from you, once you stop being convenient. I looked at that card now and thought, I never said anything. Not then. Not when Shelby laughed at my clothes. Not when Jason asked me to be understanding. Not when they built a life on ground I helped lay without ever asking what I needed in return. The message came late at night, after I'd already turned off the lamps and folded myself into bed. I didn't recognize the number at first, just a string of digits lighting up my phone screen like a distant lighthouse. I almost ignored it. But something made me open it. "Hi, Ms. Mendenhall," it said. "I work at Bloom Plus Bramble." I was on shift during the opening. I didn't say anything at the time, and I regret that. I just wanted you to know I thought what happened was wrong. You deserved better. No punctuation at the end. No fancy phrasing. But it landed harder than anything Shelby or Jason had said to me in the days since. I stared at the message, blinking at the blue glow in the dark. My throat tightened, but not from sadness, something else. Something I couldn't name yet. It wasn't the apology itself that struck me. It was the fact that this young woman, who owed me nothing, had seen me. Not just been in the room, but truly seen what happened and decided it was worth acknowledging. A stranger had extended more kindness in 2 sentences than my own family had managed in 3 phone calls. I didn't reply right away. I just set the phone down and lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow circles above me. It was one of those moments where everything is quiet, but your thoughts won't hush. That message stirred something still and stubborn that had been living in me for years. The next morning, I couldn't sit still. I tried to make coffee, but left the grounds too coarse. I watered the porch plants, but let the hose run too long. Finally, I pulled open the drawer in the dining room and took out the lease contract again. I sat at the table, the same place where I'd signed that paperwork, smiling, back when I thought doing something for Shelby would somehow fix whatever was broken between us. The paper felt heavier now. I picked it up, then put it back down. Picked it up again. My fingers ran over the embossed address at the top, the neatly typed clause about early termination, the space where I'd written my name with a pen that no longer worked. That question came back to me, sharp and steady. If I keep swallowing this, if I keep being the one who forgives, who understands, who lets it go, do I still respect myself? The answer didn't come as thunder. It came quiet. But clear. That afternoon, I took a long walk through the River Arts District. The air smelled like wet clay and coffee, and there was music coming from somewhere, a banjo maybe, or a guitar. I followed the sound for a while, then turned onto a quieter street lined with small shop fronts. Dogwood sat on the corner, its windows dusty but charming. The old sign for the tea shop that used to be there was still faintly visible behind the newer one. Cal was outside, balancing on a small ladder, painting trim in a soft, warm green. He saw me and smiled. "Iris," he said, stepping down. "Didn't expect to see you this early." "I needed to move," I said. "And I figured you might have good coffee." He pushed open the door. "Only if you don't mind it strong." The inside smelled like old paper and pine wood. Nothing was finished yet, but it already had that feeling of a place that knew how to hold quiet people. There were crates of books on the floor, a mismatched pair of armchairs, and a half-assembled bookshelf leaning against the wall. I walked the room slowly, touching the edge of a table with my hand. "This place," I said, "feels like it already knows who it is." Cal nodded. "It's not fancy, but it's honest. I'm just waiting out the lease at my old spot." Ends in a couple of months. Still haven't found anything that fits. I looked around once more and then back at him. Maybe the space isn't the problem, I said. Maybe the people in it are. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. Just handed me a chipped mug filled to the brim. When I got home later, I opened my laptop. There was an old draft email waiting in my inbox, subject line, termination request, Bloom plus Bramble lease. I'd started it weeks ago, after a different disagreement, then left it unfinished, like I was afraid of what hitting send would mean. I read through it again. Then added one line at the end. Effective immediately. I saved the draft. But this time, I didn't close the tab. Monday morning came wrapped in that soft, silvery kind of gray, where the sky looks more like brushed cotton than clouds. The world outside seemed slower, muted, like someone had turned the volume down a notch. I opened my eyes before the sun had fully risen, no alarm clock, no dreams, just a quiet certainty blooming in my chest, steady and undeniable. I moved through the house like someone gently packing up a life. I didn't rush, but I didn't hesitate either. I made coffee, though I forgot to warm the mug. I sat down at the kitchen table, where light filtered through the blinds and made long shadows across the wood grain. In front of me lay the lease agreement. Paper slightly yellowed at the edges, creased from years of being ignored. My name, Iris Mendenhall, was still there, scrawled in blue ink at the bottom, right next to a date that now felt like a version of me I'd barely recognized. I picked up a red pen from the drawer, underlined the clause that had always been there, waiting, early termination permitted with 30-day written notice by leaseholder. No explanation required. I'd read that sentence dozens of times. I memorized it. But I'd never let myself believe it. I could have done this last year. Last month. Even the week after Shelby made me feel small in front of a crowd that thought I was just the weird ant in thrifted skirts. But I didn't. I'd let guilt masquerade as grace. Let fear wear the mask of patience. Let self-erasure sound like maturity. Until now. I reached for my phone and dialed the property manager's office. My voice didn't crack. "Hi," I said, once someone answered, "I'm calling about a commercial lease on Craven Street. Number 112. My name's Iris Mendenhall. I'm the leaseholder." There was the usual pause, the soft clack of a keyboard on the other end. "Yes, Ms. Mendenhall. What can I do for you?" "I'd like to begin the process of terminating my lease. Effective immediately. I'll submit written notice today and cover whatever's left on the balance." Another pause. Then the polite professionalism returned. "All right. Would you like to share a reason for our records?" I looked out the window. A squirrel sat perched on the wooden fence, calmly breaking open a walnut, as if time was a luxury only it truly understood. "I don't feel like I belong there anymore," I said. "That's reason enough." "Understood. You'll receive confirmation and the final paperwork this afternoon." "Thank you," I replied, and hung up. That was it. No fireworks. No confrontation. Just a phone call and a signature away from reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Or maybe had never truly owned. I took a long shower. Dressed in a cotton blouse and the denim skirt I always returned to when I needed to feel grounded. I brushed my hair and left it loose, didn't bother with makeup. I didn't need to perform anything today. Downtown Asheville was waking up in its usual rhythm. Cafes had their sandwich boards out. A man with a ponytail played something mournful on his violin at the corner. Somewhere in the distance, I heard someone singing off-key to a Stevie Nicks song with the windows rolled down. The city was alive in a way that didn't demand attention, it simply was. I walked the block slowly, as if pacing through a memory. I passed the mural-covered walls I used to love, the ones I used to think would make a good backdrop for Shelby's boutique photo shoots. My feet stopped when I reached Bloom Plus Bramble for the last time. Through the wide glass window, I saw her. Shelby, mid-laugh, holding up a floaty white dress, her phone perched on a tiny tripod in front of her. Her voice, filtered and elevated, bounced cheerfully in that tone she used only for strangers on the internet. Behind her, the boutique looked polished, soft lighting, swaying dresses, delicate jewelry. A perfect illusion. But standing there on the sidewalk, I felt none of it. No connection. No sting. Just a quiet clarity that this place had never really included me. Not as a person. Just as a signature on a dotted line. I didn't go in. Instead, I stood for a few more seconds, long enough to absorb the last image I'd carry of Shelby, performing for people who didn't know her, selling clothes she never paid for, in a space she never earned. And then I turned away. The first call came at 2:13 p.m. I didn't answer. Then came 3 more within the hour, Shelby's name lighting up my screen again and again, flashing like some kind of warning I didn't need. I let them all ring out. I sat by the window with a book in my lap, pages unmoving, unread. The silence in my house wasn't empty, it was full. Full of choice. By 5 o'clock, she switched to text. The first one was frantic. Wait, what do you mean the lease is cancelled? You didn't even give me a heads up. Then. This has to be a mistake. Call me. Right now. A few minutes passed. Then. I've put everything into this. Everything. My inventory, my branding, my wholesale accounts, I have buyers depending on me. Still nothing from me. Then the guilt trip arrived on cue. Do you know how selfish this is? Honestly? I always thought you were better than this. And finally, the blow she'd been waiting to land. You know, nobody in this family has ever thought of you as someone who understands fashion. I'm the only one who can actually make this work, and you just pulled the rug out. I put the phone face down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just let the quiet do its work. The words didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how little they moved me. For years, comments like that would have gutted me, cut into the softest parts. But now? They just confirmed what I already knew. They never saw me. Not really. And I wasn't going to beg to be seen anymore. An hour later, a knock came at the front door. It was Jason. He stood there in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, hands stuffed into his pockets, that familiar sheepish look on his face, the one he used when he was 10 and broke one of Mom's teacups. Hey, he said. I nodded and stepped aside. He walked in without waiting for permission, like he always had. He didn't sit right away. Just stood in the middle of the room for a moment, then finally dropped onto the edge of the couch, elbows on knees. I heard, he said. About the lease. I waited. She's a wreck, he continued. I mean, I get that she said things she shouldn't have. But Iris, did you really have to do it this way? I stayed quiet. I just think, he went on, maybe we could have all sat down. Talked it through. Come to a compromise. I leaned against the doorway. My arms were crossed, but not from anger, more like I was trying to hold my center. She had years to fix it, Jason. He sighed. I know. But canceling the lease without warning? That's a big move. It affects a lot of people. I gave a small nod. Exactly. He looked at me, confused. You think I don't know what that store meant to her? I said. I do. I helped her build it. I just stopped pretending I was okay being treated like wallpaper. Jason stood now, pacing a little. But you didn't even tell me you were thinking about it. I shrugged. You weren't really asking how I was doing, were you? He flinched a bit at that. That's not fair. It's exactly fair, I said, calmly. When she mocked me at that party, you didn't say a word. Not a text. Not a check-in. You only called now because something she values got taken away. He opened his mouth, closed it again. You married her 3 months after Mom's funeral. I organized every detail, picked out flowers, wrote the damn eulogy. You were in Phoenix, texting me once a week. I never made you feel guilty. I just showed up. Like always. Jason looked down. I've been there for both of you. Quietly. Steadily. And it cost me more than money. It cost me parts of myself I'm only just now reclaiming. I didn't mean for it to feel like that, he said. I know, I said. But meaning well doesn't undo harm. And silence can be just as loud as cruelty. He stood still, arms heavy at his sides. So that's it? I walked over to the door and opened it. That's called a boundary, I said. It only feels harsh when people are used to walking past it. He lingered, just for a second. I still love you, Iris. I met his eyes. Then learned to love me without expecting me to disappear. He didn't answer. Just nodded once, slowly, and stepped outside. I closed the door behind him. And this time, it didn't feel like loss. The message from Shelby came on a Thursday morning. Simple. Polite. Too polite. Can we talk? Coffee at Hillcrest Cafe? Noon. I almost deleted it. But something in me, curiosity, closure, I'm not sure which, pushed my thumb toward yes. The cafe was already half full when I arrived. A bell jingled above the door as I walked in. Shelby was seated near the window, manicured fingers wrapped tightly around a latte, sunglasses still perched on her head like a crown she forgot to remove. She stood and gave a quick, strained smile. Thanks for coming. I nodded, took the seat across from her. She didn't waste time. I just think this whole thing has gotten way out of proportion, she began, voice a touch too loud for the space. It was a misunderstanding. A joke. People take everything so seriously now. I watched the foam on my tea settle into stillness. You mocked me in front of your customers. I didn't mean to, she said quickly. It was off the cuff. You know how people banter online, what's a little snark? Everyone does it. I raised an eyebrow. You said I dressed like a ghost. I mean, she shrugged, trying to laugh it off. You know what I meant. Yes, I said. For once, I think I do. She shifted in her seat, the smile faltering. Look, I need that space, Iris. The brand, the orders, the followers, it's all happening. I've worked so hard. This could ruin everything. I stayed silent. I didn't plan to hurt you, she said, her voice lower now. I thought you were used to being in the background. I thought you didn't mind. Then she said it. I figured you were already used to being forgotten. The words didn't sting the way I thought they would. They didn't cut, they confirmed. Confirmed everything I had known in my bones for years but refused to face head-on. That Shelby had never seen me as a partner. Not in the boutique. Not in the family. Only as a steps tool, useful, silent, replaceable. I looked at her, steady. I've gotten used to stepping back, I said. To letting others shine. But I never got used to being stepped on so someone else could rise. She looked away. I reached into my bag and slid a manila folder across the table. She didn't touch it. It's the new lease agreement, I said. Effective next month. The space will belong to Dogwood. Shelby's eyes widened. What? Who? Cal Freeman. He's opening a bookstore. A quiet one. With actual chairs and real conversation. She scoffed. A bookstore? Seriously? You think that's going to make better use of the space? I said calmly, he'll treat the space, and the people around him, with respect. That's a good enough use for me. She crossed her arms. You're throwing this all away over one joke? No, I replied. I'm reclaiming it after years of being the punchline. She shook her head. This is petty. You're being petty. Maybe, I said. But it feels a lot like dignity. I stood, gathered my coat. My hat was a soft canvas one I'd had for years, the brim slightly faded from too much sun and rain. I pulled it on as I turned toward the door. Here's the thing, Shelby, I said over my shoulder. You don't want the store. You want my silence. My cooperation. My approval. But I've stopped giving those away. She didn't answer. Outside, the sky had turned pale gray, the kind that always meant light rain was coming. I stepped out into it without rushing. The first drops landed on my shoulders like permission. I didn't look back. Not once. 1 month later, the sign for Dogwood went up, simple white letters on a slate blue background, just the way Cal imagined it. No balloons, no influencer promo, no countdown on social media. Just a small announcement in the local paper and a handwritten flyer in the cafe next door. Cal invited me to the soft opening on a Sunday afternoon. It wasn't much more than folding chairs, cinnamon scones from the bakery down the block, and a table with wildflowers in mason jars. A handful of folks showed up, retired teachers, grad students, the older couple who owned the bike shop 2 streets over. Nobody was trying to impress anyone. People smiled like they meant it. Talked slowly. Asked how you were and waited for the real answer. No one was filming. No one turned me into a punchline. I helped Cal stack books on low shelves, some poetry, some old gardening guides. He let me arrange the tea corner near the front window. I brewed a pot of Earl Grey, and by the time the scent drifted through the room, someone was already asking for a second cup. I didn't feel like I had to earn my place. I didn't feel like I was in the way. I felt welcome. Bloom plus Bramble didn't last the week. Shelby didn't leave a message. No explanation, no goodbye. Just a locked door and an empty storefront by Friday morning. Someone told me they saw her packing up in the dark, stuffing dresses into garment bags and ignoring anyone who passed by. Jason sent one short text. You wanted this. I respect it. I never replied. There wasn't anything left to say that hadn't already been made clear through action. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. But it was a different kind of tired, one that comes after a long hike when you finally sit down, look back at the trail, and realize you made it farther than you thought you could. That week, I pulled out an old journal from the drawer. I hadn't written anything personal in years. Not because I didn't have thoughts, just because I was afraid they might force me to act if I saw them in ink. But that afternoon, with the windows open and the breeze carrying the scent of damp earth and honeysuckle, I wrote. I used to think being an adult meant enduring discomfort to keep the peace. But I've learned that keeping the peace by swallowing yourself only makes you disappear. Quiet is not the same as safe. And silence does not mean grace when it comes at the cost of your soul. I closed the notebook, feeling steadier. Later that evening, Cal stopped by and handed me a package wrapped in wax paper and twine. Inside was a blank notebook with a soft white cover. No branding. No lines. Just open space. There's a saying, he told me, that every time you say no to what breaks you, you get to write a new chapter. I smiled and held the book like it was something alive. After he left, I made a fresh pot of tea, carried it out to the porch, and sat under the wind chimes that had hung in the same spot since the year my mother passed. The breeze picked up, soft but certain. The bells danced gently, not loudly, but enough to remind me they were there. I watched the sky turn a warmer shade of blue, and let my breath fall into rhythm with the wind. I don't know what this summer will hold. But I know this much. I will never again apologize for choosing to stand tall.